Welcome back, folks, to In the Chill of the Night, episode number 14. I'm here with Pete Gagliardi and a good friend of mine, Rich Norcross. We can sort of go back in time and have a conversation about that worst day that he encountered. But much more important than that is what he's done since that. And we're probably looking at well over 25 years this incident has happened. And I've gotten to listen to Rich many times talk about his incident and what has gone on in his life since then. And every single time I'm super inspired, and I know you will be too. Hey, Pete, how are you?
Hey, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So you got to meet Rich. Hey,
I
Rich,
did.
welcome aboard in the chill of the night. Thanks for coming on. I know we've been talking about it. I'm glad you're here.
My pleasure to be here, Ray. Pete, Ray I've known for a long time, and it's good to see an old friend and help him out.
My career in the state police, anytime I ever called you, you'd help me out. Even if it was just a tour around town, you always helped me out. So thank you. Thank you very much. So, Rich, I sort of gave it away on the intro. Why we really want to have this conversation with you tonight. I mean, what's going on across the country is just terrible over the last year and a half. It seems that law enforcement is it's open season on cops, and Pete has talked about this before. Like, why is that happening? But more importantly, I think you're certainly an example of you know a survivor, and certainly
Well,
from a critical incident, and what you've done and what you've learned from that, and certainly what you have been able to um, educate in terms of your insight around the country, in terms of surviving a critical incident and then going forward living your life. But before we jump into that, can you sort of tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe starting back to those early years of wanting to be a cop?
Sure, I actually started out in high school as a police explorer way back when. I've always been a big fan of the Explorer program and continue to support the Explorer program through the Boy Scouts whenever I can. From there, I was a dispatcher for a little bit, and then I became a cadet in Woodbury City. At
Wow.
that point in time, most of the police officers in Gloucester County started out as cadets in Woodbury or West Efford. I got picked out of the program and worked in a little town in Gloucester County called National Park, where I worked as a single officer at a time, 1 square mile town. Back then, about 21 liquor establishments. So it
Why
was
is it called national park? I've always wondered that.
because Red Bank Battlefield is there, and Red Bank was a critical battle during the American Revolution. It actually forced the British to retreat from Philadelphia
You're
down
kidding.
to no,
Wow.
no, it was a huge battle, and they wanted to get it made into a national park, but they only ever succeeded in getting it recognized by the state and county. But that's why the town was named National Park, trying to get the federal government to bring you know the Red Bank battlefield up as a national park. And
Wow.
that's the story of it. That's why they changed the name of the town, hoping that would help sway them back in the early 1900s. Um, so I was a police officer there. I learned a lot there. I learned how to talk to people. I learned about working with the community back then. I learned what being part of the community meant. Then I went on to Haddon Heights Police Department. I was in patrol for a while. I was a dare officer for a number of years, and then I ran our community policing unit for a number of years, as well as a detective with the department. In 1995, I was shot in the line of duty during a search warrant execution. Also, at that time, the lead detective from the prosecutor's office, Jack McLaughlin, was shot and killed. And my younger brother, he and his partner were off duty. They responded in when they heard on the radio what was going on, and my younger brother was also shot and killed in that incident. It took me a little over a year to recover from my wounds. to the point where I was functioning again. And then I retired from Haddon Heights PD and went to work as an agent with Camden County Prosecutor's Office, where I was appointed the commander of the intelligence services team, where we did everything from street gangs to homicides to organized crime to bikers to white supremacists. You name it, if it was organized, we were involved with it. Great, great group of people I worked with, from the sheriff's office, the county jail, the city police, the state police, and the old Camden City Police Department. And we brought all of those disciplines together, and we really affected a lot of change in the city and county of Camden. And then I was recruited to come work for the company I work for now. Out of there, they wanted my intelligence expertise to head up their intelligence division. We had just at that point begun our relationship with the New Jersey State Police. And since I had worked with so many people at the outfit over the years, they wanted me to come and head that up. And since then, when I left Camden, I had hoped to never supervise anyone with a pulse ever again. But I ended up listening to the things that the nice things people said about me, and I've been promoted 3 times in the company, and I'm now the executive vice president of CSI Technology. And then as a result of my shooting, I spend at least once a month, I'm doing a lecture somewhere about the lessons learned from my shooting, because it's really important that people learn lessons and make changes. For example, I guess we'll get into the shooting in a little bit, but, back then, and this occurred in 1995. In Camden County in 1995, to get a SWAT team took an act of God. And nobody was trained in how to execute warrants. It was old time, sergeants tell you what to do, everybody buckle up and jump on the horse and go do what you're told to do. And that's the way things were done forever. That day we were outgunned and we didn't have the equipment we needed. And as a result, we took casualties and we had a lot of problems. And I, with others, really pushed for a deep analysis of what occurred so that we could affect change. And
Wow.
as you noted, Ray, one of the things that I've been doing a lot lately is talking to the recruits, the newest generation coming in, as well as some of the folks that are within their 5-10 year mark, and a lot of supervisors and chiefs, exactly about what you said. More officers are getting shot, injured, beat up, whatever, injured in the line of duty. And a lot of it, unfortunately, I see, I have to point at the media and point a finger at them, because they've made it to the point where officers are hesitant to take action when action is needed. And also, as a result of the media, that delay that they take, that delay, that the stutter step, so to speak, that's the split second that it takes for something to happen. After my shooting, I've worked with a lot of police officers, firefighters, soldiers, uh, sailors, airmen, Marines, even Coast Guard guys that have all been involved in critical incidents. And there is one common denominator in every one of those critical incidents, and that is it just turned from okay to oh shit in the blink of an eye. And when people are hesitating to do their duty because they're afraid of how it's going to look on CNN or Fox or some other news outlet, that seconds that they take could um, cost them their lives or cost somebody else their life. And then the other thing that I see is a lot of agencies and a lot of government entities are encouraging their police to not engage the public really at all. Don't make pedestrian stops, don't make car stops. And as a result of that, you have an entire group of criminals where when I was on the job, the criminals would hide their guns in flower pots or on top of the wheel wells and things like that. Nowadays, they feel they can just carry the guns with immunity because they're pretty confident nobody's going to stop them. And that, I think, is leading to a lot of the violence that's occurring against police these days.
And that's just a continuing thing that keeps evolving and evolving and gets worse and worse and worse. And then you wind up in a situation like we have in some of the Central American countries where the citizens pray for an end to the impunity, that the government is unable to deal with crime in those countries.
It becomes a question of unable versus unwilling, in my opinion. Um,
It
I
it certainly starts out as unwilling, and then after a while, it gets so far beyond it turns into they even if they wanted to. I don't know what some of these countries would do to to shut it down militarily to get control. It's
yeah,
tough.
yeah. If you let it go too far, then it becomes a problem. And even in Camden with the crime that we had there and the violence that was occurring in Camden, we always, at least for my unit, which was in charge of this, as well as our community outreach unit, we always had wonderful relationships with the communities. We involved every grassroots organization that we could and talked to them. We were very, very active with the Pastors Association in Camden because I saw the spiritual leadership of the city is the key, to trying to maintain order and peace, and to protect the citizens. I always got offended when people would say, "Oh, Camden's this or Camden's that." Camden had a lot of problems, but some of the most wonderful people in the world I met were in that city. And you can't just blanket say, this area is horrible. Some of the greatest people that I met, some of the most, you know, dedicated human beings, give you the shirt off your back, I met in that town. Um, and then I can go over to a ritzy town that has tons of money and deal with, some of the worst people on the planet Earth. So I'm a big believer in community policing. To give you kind of an idea with our community policing unit in Haddon Heights, and get me, Haddon Heights is a beautiful town. I grew up there part of my life. I lived there when I got shot. I only lived about 3 blocks from where I got shot. Um, the town's a beautiful town, but as part of the community policing unit, the way I broke the town up is each community officer had a school in their district, and then I was the dare officer for all the schools. So I got to know the kids, the parents. It was very rare that any one of us would go on a call and we wouldn't know somebody in the household. And you know my brother took it really seriously. John was a very, very dedicated police officer and held the same values that I did. And John had basically adopted this little first grade class in the Glenview Avenue school, which was in his area, and they had planted a vegetable garden outside of the classroom. And the kids got a kick out of my brother stopping there when he was on patrol to weed the garden and pick the fruit and wave to the kids in the classroom and make faces at them. And the teachers loved them, the kids loved them. And when he was killed, those little kids were devastated. And then as a credit to the forethought of the prosecutor's office and Haddon Heights PD, they made sure that everybody in the police department got counseling, but they also arranged for counseling at all the schools because we were all involved in the schools. They made sure they had a counseling, basically a community counseling session for the entire town and a community counseling session for the neighborhood that was directly impacted, because the entire neighborhood in our incident was shot to hell.
Wow.
So,
And
Rich,
yes,
I just want to. Can I just back up 1 second on something you said a minute ago?
sure, certainly.
You said that the 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 worst day of your life incident happened 4 blocks from where you live.
Yes.
I heard that too. Wow.
Yeah. How does that how you must go by there a lot, right? In your domestic travels, right? I mean, so
We ended
how
up
does that work? What do you feel like when you drive by there?
So we ended up moving from there about a year and a half later. Haddon
Okay.
Heights, again, the town's a great town, and I had developed a lot of special relationships with people from between going to school there, and being part of the police department, and then the community outreach things that we did. Um, the town became too small for us, because everywhere we went, everybody was like, "How are you doing? We're sorry about your
Exactly.
brother. How are your parents? How are the kids?" And it got to the point where we just wanted to be somewhere where we were anonymous for the most part. So we moved away, about a year and a half later, after the shooting. But for that year and a half,
Yeah.
I didn't go that way. I went another way to get out of town.
Wow.
So
I bet you would have never in a million years thought that something like that would have
Yeah.
happened 3 blocks from your house.
no, I never would have imagined that. And that's one of the things when I teach everybody is I remind them, just because you live in the neighborhood you work in, that doesn't mean you're any safer.
Wow.
Well, most
Well,
car accidents happen a couple of blocks from your house.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Well, maybe Rich, maybe we just go back to that day then. You're talking about it. Maybe we go to that day if you don't mind.
Sure. So April 20th, 1995, we were investigating a child abuse case where a 3-year-old little girl was being molested. The suspect was her uncle slash aunt.
You were a detective at the time?
I was a detective at the
Yep.
time, and the protocol in Camden County at that time was, because of the age of the victim, the prosecutor's office was the lead
Right.
agency.
Right.
But Haddon Heights is a proud police department. If somebody's investigating a crime in our town, we're going to be part of the investigation.
Right.
And so my partner, Bob Griffith, and I were assigned to work with the prosecutor's office. Jack McLaughlin was assigned to the case. The he had graduated the police academy in December of 94 and was killed in April of 95.
Wow.
So in less than 5 months, he was killed in the line of duty.
Oof.
Jack was married, had a fantastic wife, 2 children. I've kept in contact with him over the years. I've got to hold his grandchildren, but he is not. That has
Wow.
always been something that's stuck with me. But we were investigating child abuse. The little girl was 3. The house it was happening at was the Nelson residence on Sylvan Drive in Haddon Heights. The suspect was Glenn, aka Leslie Nelson. He was going through a transsexual procedure at the time. He was accused of molesting the child. The child was his brother's daughter, and the mother of the little girl, her father was a police sergeant in Audubon, which is the next town to ours. So I knew the sergeant since I was, a teenager, and I knew the little girl, the mother, since she was a little girl. So we know about the family. We had gone out the house in the morning to see if we could get Nelson to say something, to implicate himself in the assault. During the course of the interviews, the detective Jack McLaughlin saw in Nelson's bedroom that he had a bullet reloader. The The interviews went on for quite a while inside the house. Everybody left. We headed back to the police department. We had Dyfus with us at that time. Dyfus left and went off on their own. While we're going back to the PD, Jack explains to us that he's really concerned that Nelson is going to do something to this little girl and the mother. He feels that this is some type of police conspiracy out to get him. And he, Jack's really afraid he's going to do something to hurt the little girl or the mother. So we had known Nelson had been arrested prior for a handgun. We wrote up a search warrant for the house for weapons, since there was a bullet reloader observed in the house. Now, Nelson denied any guns being in there to Jack, and the mother and father of Nelson also said there were no weapons in the house. All of them said they were over in Philadelphia at some uncle's house, because Nelson wasn't allowed to have them in the state of New Jersey. But we wrote up a search warrant. We took it to the judge. The judge approved it. It was approved for the suspect's bedroom only. Back then in 1995, search warrants were executed mainly by the officers involved in the job. Getting a tactical team back then took an act of God. So we had discussed many ways to execute the search warrant. It was finally decided that we were going to use a tried and true law enforcement method. We were going to lie, knock on the door, get one of the parents to let us in, tell them we just need Nelson to sign a piece of paper saying nothing happened and we're out of their life. And we would grab them, hook them up, and execute the search warrant. Jack volunteered to be the lead detective because he felt he'd develop a rapport with the suspect. I volunteered to be the number two. Bobby Griffith was the number three. And then behind him was Joe Downs and Ron Shute from our patrol. And then we had another patrolman at the back, Bruce Koch, at the back door. So we had a total of 5 officers at the front door and 1 officer at the back door. The mother let us into the house. I'm always a big believer in spidey sense. When Nelson had spoken to us before, he'd always spoken in this falsetto female voice. The mother yelled upstairs for Nelson to say that man that was here earlier needs to speak to you. And as I said, Nelson always spoke in this falsetto female voice. Now in a very masculine voice, he yells down, "What the fuck do you want?" Very loud. What the fuck does he want? And I've dealt with a lot of people in my life, and I always trusted my spidey sense. I noticed 2 things right away. One, the change in tonality. And then the other I recognized was I've dealt with a lot of bad people in my life. Even they don't talk to their mom that way. And my spidey sense tingled. I have my hand on my sidearm. I have my back to the wall. I'm looking at mom and dad. Jack is standing in front of the doorway to the 2nd floor. And Jack is jawing back and forth with Nelson. Bobby Griffith is holding the doorway, the screen door open. And the patrol, Joe and Ron, are behind Bobby, and Bruce is at the back door. During the course of the conversation between Jack and Nelson, Jack announces we have a search warrant. Nelson begins to move. Now, I have no idea where Nelson is in relationship to Jack because it's an enclosed staircase. I don't know if he's on the steps, at the top of the steps, looking over the half wall at the top of the steps. I have no idea. Jack pulls his sidearm once Nelson starts to move and pursues up the stairway. I pull my gun, yell to Bobby, they're running, he's running, and off I go after Jack. As soon as Jack gets to the top of the stairs, he turns and he's met with gunfire. Jack, unfortunately, never got his weapon up, never got a shot off, and it was like he was getting hit with paintballs and he was a puppet on strings. And I just remember seeing in front of me, Jack just getting hit repeatedly. And I'm thinking, go down, take cover, drop. And I see above and behind me muzzle flashes. It's a half wall in this hallway upstairs, and I see the muzzle flashes. I turned on the stairway. It's a very narrow stairway. It is a textbook definition of a fatal funnel. And I start trying to shoot through the wall at Nelson. As I'm shooting through the wall at Nelson, Nelson is shooting at me. One of the first shots I take is in my right hand, goes into my pistol grip, and basically blows my Ruger P85 up in my hand. I took another shot in the upper arm. I took 2 shots to my right chest that penetrated. One exited my abdomen. One of the bullets is in my liver to this day.
What kind of rounds are these?
AK-47,
Wow.
7.62s,
Oh,
but he
wow.
was loading his, fortunately for me, he was loading his own. So he was, thankfully cutting corners and not putting the full charge of powder in there. So they didn't have the over penetrating force that like a military grade AK-47 round would have. So I took 2 of those to the right chest. They passed both again. One went out my abdomen, the other stayed in my chest. It's in my liver. Right lung's destroyed. Diaphragm is messed up. Intestines are messed up. I took another shot. I had a big old Motorola brick radio back then that was strapped to my vest, and that took a bullet. I had a silly superstition. Every time I got a new bulletproof vest, I took the old trauma plates out of the older vests and shoved them in there. So I actually had 4 trauma plates in my vest, and I took 1 round directly to the sternum, and that put me on my butt with my head going to the first floor and my feet going to the second floor. That's when I saw Nelson lean over. That's the first time I saw Nelson at this point. Leans over the half wall and he shoots me in the leg, and the bullet goes in my leg and out my leg.
Jesus.
So at this
What's
point,
he have, a 30 round magazine?
at least he and he had the magazines combat taped together, and it's interesting you bring that up, because there's a lesson to be learned by law enforcement from Nelson. He did run out of ammunition, and he was trying to reload the weapon. He admitted, the suspect admitted to their defense attorney that they did not practice with that weapon a lot. Now, understand, Nelson loved to shoot. In the investigation that occurred afterwards, we learned that Nelson went to the range, a couple of different ranges, but he went to the range on average once a week. And once a week, he fired 1,000 rounds out of a variety of different weapons.
But he didn't practice his magazine exchanges.
He didn't practice with the AK-47 because he couldn't find an indoor range where they could take
Correct.
the AK-47.
Right.
So they didn't practice a lot with that. And
when you say he was with other people?
No. He was in mid sex procedure change.
Gotcha.
He was a dual personality, if you would, right?
Yeah, and understand, it's rather confusing, the entire story of Glenn Leslie Nelson. So, but when Nelson ran out of ammo, I remember him smacking the front of the rifle and running down the hallway to come after me. What I learned later was he was, in fact, trying to reload the weapon. Now, the magazines are combat taped together. If Nelson had practiced more with that weapon, he reloads that weapon split seconds, and I'm dead. Period. End of sentence. No questions asked. I'm dead, because I was already beat up pretty bad. So
you can't defend yourself.
No, I can't defend myself because I'm way too banged up at this point in time.
And you're lying on the stairway, right? You're
right. So for police officers that are listening, it's imperative that, not only you practice with your equipment, but you're intimately familiar with the functionality of your equipment, because in a couple seconds, I'm going to explain to you how fast this happened. So I use my elbows to push myself off of the steps, pull myself off of the steps back into the first floor. The mother steps into the doorway and starts yelling at Nelson, "Stop this, stop this. Look what you're doing to my house. Not
Okay.
not you're killing people or anything
What?
like that. What you're doing to my house."
You're hearing all this. Wow.
I'm hearing all this. I have not lost
Oh.
consciousness or anything, and I'll talk about that in a moment as well.
Oh.
Um, I pull myself up, and I see Nelson is coming down the stairs, raising the rifle over top of their mother, and I see Bobby is about to step into the line of fire. I shove Bobby back and just yelled, I'm hit, get out." So there's a couple things I'd like to share with you. I've always had a survival conscious, and I was very fortunate in my career that in the beginning of my career, I had almost every supervisor I had was an ex-Vietnam War vet and had seen combat in Vietnam. And they made it their mission to impart upon my generation survival instincts. So, for example, I had this one sergeant, we would go to the gym and lift all the time together as a crew. And he would bring Trivial Pursuit cards to the gym with us. And we'd be lifting, and he'd be, asking us what the capital of Peru is. And we're thinking, my man is screwed up. But he explained to us, you need to be able to think and move and react in order to survive. If you can't think and move in split seconds, you're going to die someday. And he goes, it doesn't matter what it is. It may not even be on the job, but you need to be able to think and move and react in split seconds. So he was training us how to think and move under physical pressure. And when I got shot, tunnel vision slammed in right away for me, but it immediately opened. And I saw Nelson running down the hallway. I knew I was upside down on the steps and needed to pull myself out. I saw Bobby running, stepping into the doorway, Nelson raising the rifle. I shoved him back and I kind of, I would have made my linebacker coach proud apparently, because I basically threw him back into the other guys coming after him. And
at this point, you're shot how many times?
7 total, but 5 penetrated.
Wow.
I then, I sent those guys kind of like a domino towards the front door, and I stumbled into a hallway leading to the kitchen.
What kind of pain are you in right now?
I'm not in any pain right then and now. The only thing, there were 2 things I felt right away. I felt this intense need to go to sleep, and I also had a hard time breathing because my right lung has collapsed, my diaphragm's been tore up. So I had a hard time breathing, but I told myself to calm down and try to breathe a little bit. And then I saw I had tan khakis on that day, and I saw that my leg was basically black, my right leg with blood. And I just grabbed my pant leg with what was left of my right hand and just started clamping down to stop the bleeding. And, I'd explained this to one of my doctors, and they told it to another surgeon. And the surgeon, he came into me later and he said, that was brilliant the way you prevented that pneumothorax. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, buddy. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Prevent the pneumothorax. I had to look up pneumothorax, so I
Right.
could.
Yes.
So I was just trying to stop the
So
blood.
you right about now, you should tell us, what is a pneumothorax?
Pneumothorax is when air builds between your lung and your chest wall,
Oh.
and it keeps your lung from inflating.
Sometimes a newborn baby, in the first breath they take, it'll be an awkward breath, and they'll do that, and they'll create that bubble between their lung and their chest.
Yeah, if you ever got a stitch running, now I didn't feel the pain, but it's similar to when you get a stitch running. Now, I was built for comfort, not speed, so running's not one of my hobbies, I'll be honest with you. Um, but when I stumbled into the hallway, I saw a window in the kitchen. I thought I was going to jump through that window. And I've had people, especially recruits, ask over the years, well, why didn't you go out through the front door? And I said, well, because I wasn't running back in front of the guy with the machine gun. So that's why I was looking for another way out of the house. When I went into the kitchen, Nelson butt stroked mom with the AK-47 and knocked her down the steps, and then started shooting through the wall to try and get me in the kitchen. But I had managed to get behind the refrigerator and take cover while he's running back up the steps and firing the assault rifle.
Now, was he under the influence? But from the time you left him the first time, all of a sudden he's very agitated when you come back. Was he under the influence of alcohol or drugs or something? Or is he just a schizo and just turned on?
So what we found out later, after all the search warrants were executed and everything was researched ad nauseum, Nelson kept documents, a significant number of documents, basically a portfolio of material that Nelson studied about killing cops. Nelson, one of the reasons that Nelson's lawyers said that Nelson became a transsexual was because Nelson wanted to have power over men. And he thought that one of the most significant people that had the power over men were police officers. So Nelson studied killing cops. And there was about 8 inches of paperwork that was found that dealt with nothing but newspaper articles, magazine articles. The internet was very new then, but some things off the internet about officers getting killed, our tactics, our equipment, the weapons he chose. For example, AK-47 is going to defeat your body armor, even if the loads are half-assed. He also had a 22 Ruger rifle cut down with 100 round magazines of 22 Magnums, also going to defeat your body armor. Had his own bulletproof vest, because back then anything we shot at you was going to get caught up in a vest, because nobody carried patrol rifles back then. It was shotguns and pistols, everybody. And the a telling thing was he had put wet towels at the bottom of all the interior doors when tear gas was introduced, because tear gas comes under a door, not over it, and set up a bunker basically waiting for SWAT, some SWAT team to make entry, and he was just going to pick them off from the perch. So, getting back to me, he's shooting in the kitchen. I see a side door. I go out the side door, and I thought, if I go out front, I'm going to get picked off, but I know the cavalry's out front. If I go out back, I know Bruce is in the back, but I don't know where in the back he is. And it's a rather confusing alleyway with outbuildings and stuff like that. And I didn't want to be wandering around trying to find somebody. So I made a decision to go towards the front of the house, collapsed on the front yard. One of our backup guys, Joe Downs, yelled to me to get up. I pulled myself up, got behind a tree and a telephone pole that had grown together, and I yelled down to Joe that, I was hit. Jack was down on the second floor. I didn't know where Bobby Griffith was, and I got to get out. Somebody I went to the academy with, Vic Player, he pulls up at that point in time. He heard the officer assist, shots fired go. Vic pulls up. Joe waves him down to me. Vic pulls up to me. He tosses me. Bobby, my partner, is caught up with me, throws me in the patrol car, and we leave. As we're pulling away, Nelson is now just going from window to window on the second floor, using them as pillboxes and just opening up on the cops.
Wow.
So we talk about preparedness with the police. The first group of officers that were there actually ran out of ammunition. This was a protracted gunfight.
Wow.
My brother and his partner are due to come in 3 to 11 tour that day. My brother's partner, Joe Sack, great guy. Joe, in fact, I'm the godfather to one of Joe's kids, and we're just dear friends. And he was my partner before he was my brother's partner. Joe always put on his radio before he came to work, just to be aware of what was going on. Joe hears what's going on, calls my brother, tells him to grab his gear. He's coming to get him, and Joe picks him up. They respond into the scene. First thing they do is they get behind a house, and there's a man in the window saying, "Please save my family. My house is getting shot up," because Nelson's just opening up indiscriminately on houses, police officers, everything.
This is a this is a residential suburban neighborhood, so the houses are real close to each other.
Yes, very close. This is not, the houses in Haddon Heights sit on postage stamps,
Yep.
and they're extremely close together. And it's a close-knit community. People are tight in these communities. So, but Nelson is shooting everything up. John and Joe pull the 4 children out of the window and help mom and dad out of the house. Joe and John carry the two kids each like footballs, run back into the park where they had parked Joe's truck behind a dirt berm, put the kids and mom and dad in the back of the truck and said, "Just stay here, don't move. Somebody will come back and get you." John and Joe went back to their position. Joe advanced to a truck in a neighboring driveway to engage. My brother went to go with his partner, and he was picked off in the right eye and killed instantly.
God damn.
Joe yells out, "Officer down, officer down." Officers on the front line laid in suppressing fire into the house to get Nelson to stop shooting. Other officers came out of cover, grabbed my brother, and carried him to the medics. Now, there's no easy or pretty way to say this. These guys are friends of ours. We've grown up together. We play ball together. We are in each other's weddings, godfathers to each other's kids. These guys came out of cover. They've got John's, blood, brains on them. He's obviously dead. They can't lose their cool. They can't lose their professionalism. They turn him over to the medics, and then they return to the gunfight. John was shot about 11 minutes into the gunfight. The entire gunfight lasted a little over 22 minutes. During the 22 minutes, Nelson fired in excess of 1,400 rounds.
Holy Christ.
At the cops.
And where's his mother all this time?
So the mom went out the front door, and she was taken into custody. And the father,
in the middle of the gunfight, she runs out the front door.
Before Nelson had started using the windows as a pillbox.
Got it.
So she came out the front door. The father came out the side door. They were both taken into protective custody, and they both lied about everything about the house during the entire time. They lied about other weapons being in the house. They lied about the layout of the house. They did not cooperate one little bit. To give you an example of the people that we're talking about, several months after this incident, the neighborhood had a healing barbecue, a community barbecue to all come together and talk to one another to get over, because all these people's houses in this neighborhood had bullet holes in them. And the mother had the audacity, I'll say, to not only come to the barbecue, but to complain about all the damage that the police did to her house. And the police had to come in and rescue her from the neighborhood because the neighborhood was about to, go a little off center, shall we say. But that's, this is the type of family that, we're talking about. So
what happens to the shooter?
The shooter, so so what ended the gunfight is something I want to tell you about. Never underestimate the value of a good dispatcher. In the gunfight, we had no command control leadership. Everybody responded into the incident and immediately became part of the incident. They were either pinned down or engaged in shooting.
Everyone.
Everybody, every boss, every supervisor, every chief, everybody was coming in and immediately getting involved. It was probably about 45 minutes to an hour before a deputy chief from the prosecutor's office arrived on scene and said, yeah, look, there's nobody in control here. I'm taking command. We're establishing a command post. We're doing this. We're doing that. And really, he organized a very chaotic situation. But the dispatcher, Melissa Bastine, she took it upon herself, hostage negotiation 101, established communication. She called the house in the middle of the gunfight. Nelson answers the phone. Hello?
You're kidding.
No, answers the phone. Hello? What are you doing? Shooting at the cops. Why are you shooting at the cops? They're shooting at me. Well, stop shooting at them. They'll stop shooting at you. Okay. Last shot fired.
No, it wasn't that easy, right?
It was.
Oh,
and, we won our officer back. We won our officer. He's dead. We won our officer. He's dead. And then finally, he says, I'll prove it to you. He threw Jack's body down from the second floor to the first floor and then used his feet to push Jack's body out the front doorway where it rolled to the bottom of the steps. Using spotter scopes, he was obviously dead. And, one thing I always tell when I'm teaching my, command and leadership classes is, some people wanted to figure out a way to go retrieve Jack's body before the suspect was neutralized or contained. You can never risk live people to retrieve a dead person. Jack was obviously dead when Jack in the initial barrage took 23 rounds. And then when Nelson got to the top of the steps, Nelson emptied the clip. And, Jack was obviously dead when he was pushed out the front door. So, for command and leadership, I always point that out. Don't give in to your emotions. Your first emotion is go get them. But it can't be. You have to look at the totality of the circumstance, and you can't risk live people for, a deceased person. And, our people didn't leave that field that day until Jack was retrieved. And they had no intention of leaving that field that day until Jack was retrieved. So after an 11-hour standoff, hostage rescue from Quantico was landing at the Glenview Avenue School where my brother had his little garden with the first graders. They were landing their helicopter there. And when Nelson heard that helicopter coming in, he surrendered and was taken into custody. He was given the death penalty twice in New Jersey. It was overturned on technicalities. We were prepping for the third death penalty trial when the state of New Jersey overturned the death penalty. And Nelson was given 2 consecutive life terms for the death of my brother and Jack. He was given an additional 10 years for shooting at me. In order to avoid an insanity plea, the state agreed to drop 73 other counts of attempted murder of police officers. They could run strings out to where 73 people had been standing and say, Nelson tried to kill you, and you. And I was an academy instructor. I was a very, very active detective, worked with a lot of towns. I knew everybody on that list. I knew them before the shooting. And that was a hard thing for me to process overall, in addition to the deaths and my wounds. But I always tell people this. Jack, my brother, and I, um, we aren't victims. Um, we were police officers doing our duty. The victims in all of this are our families. My wife, my kids, my brother's wife, Jack's wife, and his kids. They're the real victims in all of this because of their losses. Um, we were doing our duty. We had an oath to uphold, and we did it. Um, so I always tell people that we're not victims here, and we don't perceive ourselves. Well, I'm speaking for John and Jack now, but I don't perceive us as victims. I perceive us as doing our duty and um, doing it to the best of our ability.
Where's the
When
suspect? Where's the suspect now, Rich?
um, I'm not quite sure which prison facility Nelson's at currently. Nelson's been bounced around between a couple of facilities due to high risk things of that nature. So I'm not quite sure where Nelson is these days. The so just a couple of more things about the shooting. I myself was in surgery for about 7 hours the first time. Um, I During that period of time, the media was reporting that I was dead and my brother was dead.
Hmm.
So I had people coming to my house telling my kids and my in-laws that, we're sorry that Rich and John are both dead,
Wow.
which was hard. My wife was in the hospital. And again, we talked about the media earlier on. Um, the media in this case was reporting that I was dead. My wife called my father-in-law and he's watching my kids and she calls him and he says, "I'm sorry to tell you, hon, Rich is dead." And she goes, "No, Dad, I just talked to the doctor. Rich is going to make it. He's going to survive." And he tells my wife, "No, I'm sorry. They're wrong. He's dead." And he's like, "No, the doctor told me he's going to make it. Channel 6 says he's dead." Well, Channel 6 isn't operating on him. That's the kind of power that the media has over people's psyche. He's not listening to his daughter who's there at the hospital. Um, so, needless to say, that was very difficult. I died a little later that night. I actually coded. They missed some internal bleeding on me
Wow.
because AK-47 rounds tumble through the air. They don't go straight like U.S. military rounds. The U.S. military is always operated under it's better to wound than kill, because if the person's wounded and alive, at least two people are going to carry that person out of combat. So you've taken out three people instead of one. Where the Russian and Eastern Bloc militaries operate under the kill them all theory. Um, so they missed some internal bleeding. I coded. They gave me a transfusion. They gave me a jump start, brought me back to life. Since that day, I've had 23 surgeries as a result of this incident. My last one was about 5 years ago, and I died one other time.
Wow.
I found out that I'm allergic to fentanyl, and the way they figure that out is really fascinating. They give it to you, and you die. Um, and then they bring you back and go, "Hey, man, don't ever take fentanyl." So, make sure they don't put it in any IVs or anything else you ever get, which I make
Wow.
sure they don't. Um, so, physical therapy was over a year before I could start using my arm again properly. It took me about five months or so to start walking again properly.
When did you hear about your brother?
So So I only knew Jack McLaughlin as John. That's his real name. I only met John McLaughlin the day before.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
And he was brand new. And he worked in the child abuse unit. He had volunteered to be in that unit. And, fortunately for us, we didn't deal with a lot of child abuse. Um, so while you're on life support, you can still kind of get words out. And I had woken up and I had asked the nurse if John had made it, even though, in my subconscious I knew he didn't. But I asked her if John had made it. And she told me that no, I'm sorry, John didn't make it. And, I got upset. And that's when she said, I know what you're going through. I recently lost my brother to a tragedy. Losing your sibling is so hard. And I'm like, lady, we're not talking about the same person.
Hmm.
And that's how I found out my brother had gotten
Oh,
on scene and died. My wife, my
yeah,
wife,
because you
and
you had no idea that he was coming on the scene.
no,
Oh,
I was at the hospital. Hopefully, 11 minutes in, I was at the hospital probably. Um,
Jeez.
but I didn't know he was there. But John, I would expect John to be there, no matter who it was. I'm fairly certain that when they first got there, he had no idea what was going on or who, initiated it. So he probably doesn't even know that I was shot because he was shot so soon after he arrived. Um, so that's how I found out my brother died. They had to sedate me at that point in time because I kind of lost it. Um, and at that point in time, as I, started to come around again, I realized that this was going to overwhelm the hell out of me because, at that point in time, I didn't trust anything anybody was saying to me. And I told, other than my wife, and I told her I wanted to see Bobby, who was my partner, to make sure that he was alive. And Bobby came in and, I used my left hand and wrote on a pad what happened. And he laid out to me everything that happened after I evac'd out of the scene. And, that's how I learned about my brother's death. Um, I was in the hospital for 10 days, and that was about all they could take of me.
you
They
you
told me,
missed you missed your brother and Jack's funeral.
yeah, I missed both funerals. The Camden Police Department really came up big for me. Camden PD took it upon themselves to put videographers from the police department up at all types of vantage points for the funeral. And they actually made a funeral procession video and service video for me, so that I could watch their funerals and go out to their sites after I was able to go out and get mobile again. And
Jesus.
I held my own, kind of private funerals for both of them. Um, so that was exceptionally hard for me. And again, making decisions, alcohol was flowing pretty freely at that time. My other colleagues were trying to figure out how they were going to get me in an ambulance to take me to the funeral because I wanted to go, and they didn't want to say no to me. The only thing they couldn't figure out is if they unplugged me from the wall, what would happen if they plugged me into a battery and it didn't restart right away. That's the only thing that saved me. Because other than that, I'm fairly certain they would have hijacked me for the funeral. Um, but I had friends of mine. I had one of my old sergeants that had retired. He came and actually a couple of them came and stayed the whole day with me. These are guys that had taught me so much as a young police officer, and I respected beyond words. And they stayed with me the entire time, so I wasn't alone. Um, and they kept me occupied as opposed to being obsessed with the new news coverage. Um, and that was a big benefit for me as well.
Today, with the technology today, you would have probably been there, watched it live as it
Yeah,
unfolded right from your hospital bed.
yeah. The technology back then, it's like we didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have, none of the detectives had cell phones. We had pagers and quarters and dimes in our pockets to call from payphones.
Right. The cell phones were those big carrying things with a battery. They weighed about 10 pounds.
Right, and they were a fortune for anybody
Yeah,
that
right.
was for anybody that wasn't the ATF.
They were
They were
box phones.
so cell phones weren't there then. There definitely was no like streaming video services at that time. We were at a technological disadvantage at that point. But there were a lot of lessons that were learned from this incident. Like I said, I championed the cause of looking at our incident and pointing out problems and trying to get those problems resolved. For example, nobody had been given any formal how to execute a search warrant training. Nobody, no police department carried, high capacity rifles. Nobody carried carbines. Nobody carried any assault rifles at that point in time in cars. There were no, like I said, getting a TAC team took an act of God. Now in, Camden County, the greater Philadelphia metropolitan area, there are regional SWAT teams that have officers on duty every day of the week, all day long. So
And they
if you
probably
haven't,
have medics too.
they have medics that are with them. That was one of the things that we discussed about having combat medics as part of the SWAT teams. And communications was an issue. Interoperability of firearms was an issue. Um, Sharing of ammunition was a problem. Um, when I teach, especially detectives and patrols, I tell them, you need to have a go bag with you, and that go bag needs to have power bars, water, spare ammunition, flex cuffs, additional cuffs, dry socks, anything you're going to need for a protracted situation. You need to have
Tourniquet.
tourniquet, medical kit. Make sure you have that with you at your disposal easily. Sitting under your desk is going to be useless, and not, having a kit that has everything ready to go in a bag is going to be useless as well. You're not going to be stopping on the way to a hostage situation and picking up a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. You're going to be hustling to get there. And if you have that bag with you, you can be prepared for that worst case scenario. And, I did a lecture for the New Jersey Chiefs of Police Association, one of the other things recently. And one of the other things that I go through in my lectures is I talk about the IACP's guidelines on how to handle, from an administrative point of view, an officer involved shooting. And we go through, everything. And I point out, what was done improperly with our event and what was done really well with our event. So and one of the chiefs came up to me after the class and said, I took your class many, many years ago when I first became a chief. And he goes, the one thing I remember you saying is, if you don't do anything else, at least print out the IACP guidelines and put them in your car so you have them with you. And he said, exactly 24 hours after you told me that, I had an officer that was shot and a suspect that was killed. And he said, I was so thankful I listened to you and had those with me. And, everybody was the better for it because I had the playbook right there in my hands. So, I take a lot of pride in that type of preparedness as a result. But the lessons that we learned from there really need to be studied and carried across the board so that different people can prepare for those worst case scenarios, because, you always have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And when I teach my classes, I use a lot of quotes in my classes when I teach, and that's because it's easy to remember concepts through quotes. So, like, one of my quotes is, chance favors the prepared. And we talk about practicing with your equipment and working your mind and your body together so you can think and move. We talk about, spiritual preparation. We talk about just having the equipment you need when you are involved in a situation. And it's not even just being involved in a shooting. It's, have your rubber gloves with you so you can help somebody on a car accident scene. Get a flashlight that you can carry on your belt, because you get into a car chase in Camden County, New Jersey, you're going to end up in Camden City as sure as God made little green apples, and you're going to be chasing somebody into an abandoned property. And the first thing you need to be able to do is see if there's a floor there. The person you're chasing knows if there's a floor there and knows where the holes are, but you do not. So you need that flashlight so you're not in the basement of some, abandoned building. And then one of the other quotes that I use is from General Mattis, who was the Secretary of Defense, somebody that, whose leadership I personally admire. He has a quote, be polite, be professional, be prepared to kill everybody you meet. And the reason I use that quote is, and I break it down line by line, I will tell everybody, you want to stay out of internal affairs and you want to be respected, be polite to people. Be polite to everybody. I was in the street, I was always polite to everybody. I didn't care who you were. It was always sir, ma'am, miss. It was always professional. Be polite and be professional. When I ran the intelligence squad, I would tell the people that wanted to be in the unit that you need to be able to talk with people and you need to be able to build rapport with people. And Ray, you understand this for sure. You're only as good to me as your next informant. If you can't relate to people and talk to people and get them to give you information, you're useless to me, because our funding for informants was a Happy Meal gift certificate. And even that was rare. So it depended on your ability to be professional and be polite. And that will make you successful in your career. And it will also help you in your career. The other line, be prepared to kill everyone you meet. Quite frankly, you have no idea who your next opponent is going to be. Everybody, there's people running around all over the planet that their rubber bands wound just a little bit too tight. And you have no idea when that rubber band is going to snap. It could be when they go to a mall. It could be when they go to, they cross a bridge and get stopped by somebody. They're visiting a school. You have no idea when somebody's rubber band is going to snap. Back in, I believe it was 2014 or 2015, there was an incident at the U.S. and Customs Enforcement Office in Los Angeles. A supervisor had pulled in one of the agents and was disciplining him. During the discipline, the agent pulled out his sidearm and shot the supervisor and then killed him. And then two other agents came in and killed that agent. So you literally have no idea who your opponent is going to be. So there's a lot of lessons that, I try to take out of what happened, and I try to share those lessons and make them relative to 2021, because there's not a lot of people like me that, survived this type of horrendous incident. And also, I had made a pledge to my brother and Jack that I would never let their memory die, and I was not going to let their deaths be in vain. That I was going to affect change in their honor, and I've affected a lot of change. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, After my lectures, I've lost track of the number of officers that have come up to me and asked for my number, and I give it to them, and they call me later that night, and they tell me, I wanted to let you know that I was going to commit suicide because of whatever they were involved in, but after hearing you and hearing how you survived, I know I can get through it now.
Wow.
And I wanted to thank you for, inspiring me. So while my incident was a long time ago, I think the message I have is now even more timely than ever, because of the times and because of just not a lot of voices like mine that are out there.
And Richard, it's a message that needs to keep on giving. Have you ever thought about writing a book about this and documenting all these lessons learned? And I mean, it's an incredible story, and God bless you for your service. But what's going to happen? I mean, we all get old, and at some point, it should keep going. That's my point. This story should be documented for posterity. I don't want to be corny about this, but
Right.
that's what I mean.
So the first step that I've done in those terms, Pete, is we made a documentary a few years ago with Rowan University to preserve some of the voices besides mine. As to that day, we have like one of the things I'm most proud of is we found the family that John had rescued from the house and talked to them now about that day and my brother.
Wow.
And we talked to other citizens, other officers, the spouses, the kids of the officers. That was my first step in preserving this memory, and also preserving the memories of not just the two people that were killed. A book is in my future, but it's kind of on my to-do list. And as I'm a little OCD, so my I knew that to get a chuckle out of you. My OCD will make me do it, but finding the time to do it is the challenging thing. And I also have a few things I wrestle with morally. Like I don't charge for my lectures ever. When agencies have or people have money that they would like to pay to me, I always have them actually give it to. There's a memorial clock that Haddon Heights erected um, in honor of my brother and Jack, and we've since added a firefighter that died in the line of duty from Haddon Heights on it. That costs a lot of money to upkeep that the town can't pay. So I have people donate to the clock fund, and I have people donate to the scholarship fund in my brother's memory. And that, again, that's timely because it's a scholarship for criminal justice majors in a time when getting people interested in criminal justice is extremely difficult.
Well, I don't want to belabor the point, but if you had a book, you'd have people from California to the north, the south, the east, the west, donating the profits of that book to the cause that you select.
Yeah, and that's what I need to control. So again, I'm working on it. I have an outline and where I'm going. I just have not finished putting pen to paper yet.
Well, we just heard your outline. That was quite incredible.
Story.
So, Rich, well, and before I forget, we will add links in the show notes to not only that documentary, but any of the other fundraising links that you'd like us to. We could put that in the show notes as well. But my final question was actually going to be, is with this tragedy, what have you done to sort of pay it forward? And you've already explained that. And I can't thank you enough for what you continue to do for the law enforcement community and for this great country in general. So thank you. And thanks for coming on.
All right, Pete.
And God bless the families that were affected here.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very hard on the families. My wife, I credit my wife 100% with me moving on and not feeling sorry for myself. She really pulled me up by my bootstraps, and I have to, thank her profusely.
Just
Um,
incredible.
so Ray, I've appreciated our friendship for more years than either of us really would like to count at this point in time. Probably about 27 years.
Wow.
And Pete, it's a great pleasure to finally meet you, and I
It's
appreciate
an
both
honor.
of you
It's an
guys.
honor to meet you.
Oh, thank you for that. But I appreciate you guys giving me the time to talk about this, and hopefully awaken some other people. And in the links that you're going to put up, Ray, if you were able to get a link to the IACP guidelines for officer involved shootings,
Certainly.
that would be very helpful for people, because it really gives the agency a step-by-step playbook as to what they should be doing, from the frontline supervisors to um, to officers involved, frontline supervisors, bosses. And I'll just leave with one last quick story. A friend of mine, he went on a 911 hang up call a week after he had taken my class, him and his partner. This time, instead of it being a hang up 911 call, it was actually a home invasion in progress. As they walked up to the front door flew open, and the suspect shot my friend in the hip with a 45 caliber pistol. He went down. They both returned fire. Suspect retreated and ran out the back. But both guys were named Chris. The one that's not wounded jumps on top of the one that is, starts applying immediate pressure, tells him to, remember what Rich taught us: keep calm, don't go to sleep, stay awake, fight it, talk to me, keep talking to me, calm yourself. And he kept pressure on the injury, and lo and behold, to find out that the fractured hip nicked his femoral artery.
Wow.
And the doctor said that if his partner hadn't kept this cool and kept that pressure on the entire time, Chris would have died. And so those IACP guidelines talk about those things. So they're critical.
Wow. Thank you for that, and we certainly will. You're a great American, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
So are you guys. I appreciate everything you've done over the years as well, both of you. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you,
safe.
Rich.
All right, guys. Thank you.